hearing. Let me ask you what you heard from the budget director today. He gave a lengthy explanation yesterday to reporters. He spoke to you about it today. What were you keen to hear about? What did you hear about from the director?
Well, the director made clear, as far as I'm concerned, that the Trump budget doesn't put taxpayers or hardworking Americans first. It puts the wealthy and the well-off first. It balances itself on the backs of working families, middle-class folks, senior citizens, the poor, the sick, the afflicted, as well as rural America, all to ultimately provide the wealthiest amongst us with a dramatic tax cut. It's based on the premise that a significant tax cut will generate huge economic growth, but there's no evidence that I can find or that reasonable economists have been able to find to support this trickle-down economic theory.
Let's spin this forward if we could. Where do we go from here? You've heard from the OMB director. You've seen the budget the White House has proposed. What do you and your fellow Democratic lawmakers do now?
Well, we have a recess next week where we're going to communicate directly with the American people about the consequences of this budget, which would cut Head Start, cut Meals on Wheels, cut a wide variety of programs such as Medicaid, cut assistance to nursing homes, that people all throughout America, not just in urban America, communities like I represent in Brooklyn, but in suburban America and rural America, rely upon would be devastated by this budget. We'll talk directly to the American people over the next week, and then we'll reconvene Washington, D.C. as a budget committee to go over the exact details of the budget and to vote on it. I hope that we'll be able to kill that budget in committee. Republicans will try to advance it to the floor of the House of Representatives.
Are you optimistic that we are going to see some semblance of regular order, that the budget process is going to play out the way historically it has? We haven't had it play out that way in recent history.
Well, the Republicans have run on the concept of a return to so-called regular order, where we would have a hearing, a markup of the budget, it would go to the floor, voted on in the House, over to the Senate, and then sent to the president. It's not clear to me that many of my colleagues on the Republican side of the aisle want to vote on a budget that would be so devastating to the constituents that they represent. It's good to parade the headline that this is a budget that is fiscally responsible and will reduce or eliminate the deficit over the next 10 years. But the more that Americans learn about the details, the fine print in what is being proposed, the more they're likely to reject this Trump budget.
Do you agree with the director of the OMB when he says that when you look at a lot of the programs the government funds, not enough focus is placed on how you get people out of having to use those programs? Is there too much contentment within Congress, within government, for those programs to exist as they have been, not a big enough appetite for reform?
Well, we want to make sure that we can provide Americans in need with a hand up, not a handout. There's uniform support for this. The notion that government programs create dependency does not find any support in the academic literature or in the objective studies that have been created. That's just a smokescreen, an argument that's made by many of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, or the OMB director, to justify the devastating cuts that are being made. Yes, we want to create a situation where we can create more jobs and economic for hardworking Americans out there. That occurred during the last 8 years of the Obama administration. 12 million private sector jobs were created without any cooperation from the other side. We as Democrats are willing to work together on this issue, but we have to have Republicans who are willing to help us find common ground. The
White House says that Democrats are complacent. They're willing to live with 1.92% growth. They're not willing to be aspirational to think the U.S. economy could grow at 3% or 4% as the White House thinks. However dubiously the economy may here in the next couple of years. How do you respond to that criticism, that there's a complacency in the Democratic Party when it comes to economic growth?
Well, America's a great country, and we've experienced considerable economic growth under Democratic presidencies. Barack Obama, for instance, inherited a train wreck of an economy, a mess that was handed to him by George W. Bush. 400,000 jobs lost during the 8 years of the Bush administration, 12 million plus jobs gained under Barack Obama. We saw 4.0 rates of economic growth under the Clinton administration, 20 million plus jobs that were created. So we've seen not just rhetoric coming from the Democratic side of the aisle, but actual results. We believe in American exceptionalism. We believe that we can find common ground to further stimulate this economy, but we have to find a partner on the other side of the aisle.
I've looked at the maps of how people voted in your district. I live in Brooklyn. There weren't a whole lot of Democratic voters who decided to vote for President Trump, but elsewhere in the country that did happen. They were disenfranchised. They felt like they weren't getting what they needed from this government. How does the Democratic Party reach out to those voters, many of whom may have been traditionally Democratic voters who thought they would try something different, get them back into the Democratic Party?
Well, we have the policies that are designed to help out hardworking Americans all throughout the country, in rural America, in the Rust Belt states, and in inner city communities such as those that I represent. But we have to do a better job of communicating those policies to voter and also indicate to them that we do feel their pain, that we do understand that there's a reasonable amount of economic anxiety that exists because of wage stagnation, underemployment, the high cost of a college education, the loss of pensions, and these are issues that we as Democrats are prepared to work on, but the starting point is to indicate to the voter in a clear, authentic fashion that we understand what they're going through and we're going to work hard to address it.
All right, the congressman from the 8th District